She fell into the millionaire's arms on a rainy night, and destiny changed her life. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. Rain lashed against the windows of the Montgomery mansion with a violence that seemed determined to tear the very foundation from the imposing structure. Emily adjusted her simple uniform for the third time that night, trying to ignore the cold that seeped through her clothes. It wasn't just the weather making her tremble. There was something in the air, a different kind of electricity, that made her heart beat faster than normal. It had been exactly 8 months since she started working in this house, and during all that time she had remained in the shadows, an almost invisible presence, exactly as Mr. Richard Montgomery preferred. Her employer, a 40-year-old man who carried on his countenance the marks of a life she could only imagine, rarely directed more than 2 words to his staff. Emily knew his routine like the back of her hand. He arrived from the office at 7, in the evening dined alone in the library, always alone, and then retreated to his private office on the 2nd floor, from which he emerged only the following morning. He was a man of habits as precise as the Swiss watch he wore on his wrist. Tonight, however, something was different. Emily noticed it the moment he walked through the front door, soaked by the rain, his red eyes revealing something she had never seen before: vulnerability. He didn't even touch the dinner she had prepared with such care, going straight up to the 2nd floor with heavy steps. She was finishing organizing the kitchen when she heard the noise, the sound of glass shattering upstairs, followed by a silence even more disturbing than the storm itself. Emily hesitated. She knew she shouldn't go upstairs, that her work was limited to the 1st floor of the mansion, but something in her gut compelled her to check. She climbed the stairs with her heart in her throat, her steps muffled by the red carpet decorating the steps. The 2nd floor hallway was shrouded in darkness, except for a sliver of light escaping from the partially open door of the office. That's when she heard the stifled sobs. "Mr. Montgomery?" she called softly, pushing the door with trembling fingers. The scene she found left her paralyzed. Her employer was sitting on the floor among shards of glass from what had once been a picture frame, holding an old photograph in his hands. His broad shoulders shook with the contained crying of someone who had spent too long keeping their own tears inside. "Emily," he raised his eyes, and for the first time in 8 months, truly saw her. "I'm sorry about this. I'm not at my best right now." She should have backed away. She should have apologized for the intrusion and returned to her duties. But there was something about this usually composed man, now completely vulnerable, that prevented her from taking a single step backward. "Can I help with anything, sir?" "Stay," he asked, his hoarse voice carrying a weight she didn't fully understand. "Just stay a while." Emily approached slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal, and sat beside him on the floor. The silence between them was heavy, laden with unspoken words and emotions on the surface. In the crumpled photograph in his hands, an elegant woman smiled next to a younger, lighter Richard. "It's been 10 years today," he murmured, more to himself than to her. 10 years since she left me." The rain continued its melancholy symphony. Outside, but inside that office, time seemed to have stopped. Emily said nothing. There was nothing to say. She just stayed there, her silent presence offering a comfort that words couldn't express. When he finally raised his face to look at her, there was something different in his eyes, a gleam she had never seen before. His hand found hers in the dark, and Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. It was wrong, she knew it was. But when he leaned toward her, his lips trembling with contained emotion, she couldn't, or didn't want to, pull away. The morning sun filtered lazily through the curtain gaps when Emily opened her eyes, taking a few seconds to recognize where she was. Mr. Montgomery's office seemed different in the daylight, less intimidating, but infinitely more accusatory. Her heart raced as she recalled the events of the previous night, and she rose with a start, straightening her wrinkled uniform with trembling fingers. Richard was still sleeping in the leather armchair, his expression serene in contrast to the emotional storm of the night before. Emily took this moment to escape silently, descending the stairs like a guilty shadow. Her mind was a whirlwind of confused thoughts and contradictory emotions. The following hours were an exercise in self-control. Emily focused on her usual tasks, trying to keep her hands busy to not let her mind wander. She prepared breakfast as she always did, organized the correspondence on the silver tray, but each of her movements seemed artificial, as if she were acting in a poorly rehearsed play. It was only in the late afternoon, as she was finishing organizing the laundry, that the inevitable encounter occurred. Richard appeared at the door, his impeccable suit and rigid posture back in place, as if the vulnerability of the previous night had been just a feverish dream. "Emily," his voice was controlled, professional, "can we talk for a moment?" She followed him to the library, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she was sure he could hear it. The aroma of old books and leather that always calmed her now seemed suffocating. "About last night," he began, maintaining a safe distance between them. "It was a mistake. I wasn't in my right mind, and I took advantage of your kindness in an unforgivable way." Emily felt each word like a stone in her stomach. "Yes, sir. I understand perfectly. You're an exemplary employee, Emily. I don't want this to affect your work or make you feel uncomfortable here." He spoke as if he were in a business meeting, not discussing something that had completely changed her world. "Don't worry, Mr. Montgomery. I will continue performing my duties normally." The words came out automatic, rehearsed, betraying the storm raging inside her. "Good. Then it's settled." He nodded, formal. "You may return to your work." Emily left the library with shaky legs, her emotions oscillating between shame and a deep sadness she couldn't name. The following weeks dragged on in an apparently normal routine, but laden with avoided glances and heavy silences. It was only a month later that the first symptoms began to appear. At first, they were just occasional dizzy spells, which she attributed to the stress of the situation. Then came the morning sickness, the inexplicable fatigue, the hypersensitivity to smells. Emily tried to ignore the signs, but her body seemed determined not to let her forget that night. On a particularly difficult morning, after spending hours hugging the toilet bowl, she finally gathered the courage to buy the test. Her hands trembled, so much she could barely hold the small package, as she waited through the longest minutes of her life. When the 2 pink lines appeared, clear and undeniable, Emily sat on the bathroom floor and cried. They weren't tears of sadness or joy. They were tears of pure fear of the unknown unfolding before her. How would she tell him? How would he react? What would happen to her job, her life? The answer to some of these questions came sooner than she expected. That same week, during the dinner she was serving, a particularly strong dizzy spell caught her off guard. The sound of the silver tray hitting the dining room floor echoed through the mansion like a harbinger of the storm to come. The promised dinner was served on the terrace, a rarely used space in the mansion that was now decorated with soft lights and fresh flowers, a touch that Emily suspected was Mrs. Martha's work. The night was pleasant, with a gentle breeze that made the tree leaves dance softly. Richard was already waiting when she arrived, dressed more casually than she had ever seen him, in a light blue shirt and dark dress pants. There was something different about his posture, a softness she didn't recognize in the always so formal man. "Thank you for the invitation," Emily said, sitting in the chair he pulled out for her. "Thank you for coming," he replied, pouring water into her glass. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The nausea has decreased a bit." A silence settled between them, more comfortable than previous ones, but still laden with expectation. It was Richard who finally broke it, his voice low and controlled. "I've spent these weeks thinking a lot, Emily, about us, about the child, about who I am and who I want to be." He paused, taking a sip of his own water before continuing. "You must have noticed that I'm not exactly what you'd call a warm person." Emily nodded gently, waiting for him to continue. Richard took something from his pocket, an old photograph different from the one on the rainy night. In this one, a boy of approximately 10 years old sat rigidly between an elegant couple who barely smiled. My parents were complicated people, he began, his voice carrying a weight Emily had never heard before. For them, professional success was everything. Love, affection, attention were considered unnecessary weaknesses. I grew up learning that showing emotions was a sign of failure. Emily felt her heart tighten as she saw the pain in his eyes as he continued. When I married Lauren, I thought I had overcome all of this, that I could be different. But when she left me, after just 2 years, I realized I had become exactly like my parents, cold, distant, unable to show affection. You're not incapable, Emily found herself saying, her voice soft but firm. That night, you showed more emotion than many people show in an entire lifetime. Richard raised his eyes to her, surprised by her words. Maybe, but I also ran away afterward. As I always do. Are you running now? The question hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. Richard fiddled with his untouched plate before answering, No, I don't want to run anymore. This baby, our child, deserves more than that. You deserve more than that. It was then that something unexpected happened. A feminine voice, elegant and cutting like crystal, interrupted the moment. What a touching scene. Richard, darling, I didn't know you now had romantic dinners with the help. Emily felt her blood freeze. At the entrance to the terrace stood Bethany Monroe, Richard's ex-fiancée, and one of the most influential women in high society. Tall, elegant, with a red dress that seemed to have been tailor-made, she was the embodiment of everything Emily was not. Bethany, Richard stood up, his voice returning to its usual cold tone. What are you doing here? Well, darling, do we need an invitation now after everything we've been through? She approached, her high heels echoing on the terrace floor. I came to surprise you, but I see... Her eyes traveled Emily up and down, with disdain. You're already well accompanied. The night air suddenly felt heavy, and Emily felt her stomach churn, this time not because of the pregnancy. The moment of vulnerability and connection had been brutally interrupted, and now a new storm was forming on the horizon. Bethany's presence transformed the mansion into a minefield of unspoken tensions. In the days following her unexpected appearance, on the terrace, she began to make increasingly frequent visits, always arriving at the most inopportune moments and staying for hours on end. Emily observed, with a growing knot in her stomach, how the ex-fiancé moved about the house with the familiarity of someone who already considered themselves the owner of the place. Her comments, always coated in false sweetness, were small poisoned arrows precisely aimed to make Emily feel increasingly smaller. Dear, it can't be easy for you, can it? Bethany commented one morning, while Emily arranged the flowers in the frey entrance hall. Having to adapt to such a refined environment, especially in your condition. Emily felt her hands tremble slightly, but maintained her composure. Don't worry about me, ma'am. I'm perfectly adapted. Oh, of course you are, Bethany laughed, a musical sound that carried a veiled cruelty. Richard always had a, how can I put it, a soft spot for lost causes. But you must know, dear, that men like him always return to their true place, to people of their own circle. Before Emily could respond, Richard appeared in the hall, his expression visibly tensing upon seeing the two women together. Bethany, I thought I made it clear that your visits need to be scheduled. But Richard, darling, I was just having a friendly conversation with your protégé. Bethany's smile was as sweet as poisoned honey. In fact, I was just commenting on how you've always been so generous, offering shelter to an employee in her condition. So noble of you. Richard took a step forward, his eyes darkening in a way Emily had never seen. I think you've overstayed your welcome for today, Bethany. As you wish, darling, but before... She took an envelope from her designer handbag, handing it to Richard with a theatrical flourish. The invitation to next week's charity ball, all of society, will be there, and your place at the main table is already reserved. By my side, naturally. After Bethany finally departed, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume and tension in the air, Emily felt her legs weaken. Richard was immediately at her side, guiding her to the nearest sofa. Don't listen to her, he murmured, his voice laden with contained anger. Bethany has always been a specialist in manipulation. Why is she doing this? Emily asked, her hands unconsciously resting on her belly that was beginning to show the first signs of pregnancy. Why now? Richard sat beside her, running his hands over his face in a gesture of weariness. Because she always wanted power. Marriage to me represented that. Status, money, influence. When I ended our engagement, she never really accepted. Ducky. And now? Now she must have found out about... He made a vague gesture indicating their situation and is determined not to lose what she considers her rightful place. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in his tone of voice, a veiled concern suggesting that Bethany was capable of much more than simple, spiteful comments. "There's something you're not telling me," she observed, studying his tense expression. Richard hesitated. For a moment before responding, "Bethany has powerful connections. She's destroyed people before, Emily. Reputations, careers, entire lives. Are you worried about your reputation?" The question came out more bitter than she intended. "No," he answered immediately, taking her hands in his. "I'm worried about you. About both of you." His free hand rested gently on her belly, the first gesture of this kind he had made since learning of the pregnancy. The moment of tenderness was interrupted by Mrs. Martha, who hurriedly entered the room. "Mr. Montgomery, forgive the intrusion, but there's something you need to see on the internet." The housekeeper extended a tablet, her hands trembling slightly. On the screen, sensationalist headlines screamed in large letters about the alleged affair between businessman Richard Montgomery and his maid, accompanied by photos of him and Emily in moments that should have been private, including that night on the terrace. The scandal exploded like a bomb in the world of high society. Within hours, the story was on all gossip portals and social columns, each with its own sensationalist version of the facts. The photographs, though apparently compromising, had clearly been manipulated to appear more intimate than they really were. Emily could barely breathe as she read the malicious comments on social media. Gold digger, opportunist, home wrecker. Each word was like a stab in her already fragile heart. The worst were the montages suggesting encounters that never happened, fabricated moments to create a sordid narrative. "I'll sue every one of them," Richard declared, his voice trembling with rage as he spoke on the phone with his lawyers. "This is defamation, image manipulation, invasion of privacy." But Emily knew the damage had already been done. Even if they managed to deny everything, people would always remember the scandalous headlines, not the retractions in fine print. "I need to get out of here," she murmured, more to herself than to Richard. "I can't continue being the cause of your ruin." "No," he turned abruptly, setting the phone aside. "You're not going anywhere. I won't let Bethany win like this." "So it was her?" Emily asked, though she already knew the answer. "Who else would have access to this house? Who else would have motives to destroy us in this way?" Richard ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "She's always been obsessive, but this is a new level of cruelty." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. The words of her mother, Dorothy, echoed in her mind. "Daughter, simple folk like us don't mix with rich people without getting hurt." At the time, she had found the advice outdated, but now the decision was made in the early hours of the morning. With a heavy heart, Emily began to pack her few things. She would leave a note for Richard. It was the least he deserved after everything. But before she could finish closing her suitcase, a wave of nausea stronger than usual hit her. The world spun, and she had to lean against the dresser to avoid falling. That's when she felt something different, a soft movement in her womb like the beating of a butterfly's wings. Her eyes filled with tears as she placed her hand on her belly. It was the first time she had felt the baby move, a moment that should have been of pure joy, now stained by the bitterness of the circumstances. "Emily," Richard's voice surprised her. He was standing at the door, still wearing the clothes from the day before, as if he hadn't slept. His eyes scanned the room, stopping at the half-packed suitcase on the bed. "What are you doing?" "What needs to be done?" she replied, her voice breaking. "I can't let your life be destroyed because of me." "Because of us," he corrected, entering the room and closing the door behind him. "And you're mistaken if you think I'm going to let you face this alone. Richard, be realistic. Your reputation, To hell with my reputation, he exploded, surprising her with the intensity of his reaction. I've spent my entire life worried about appearances, about what others think, about maintaining a perfect image. And where has that gotten me? To be a lonely man, incapable of showing affection, repeating the same mistakes as my parents. He approached, taking her hands in his. But you changed all that. For the first time in my life, I'm feeling something real, something worth more than all the appearances in the world. Emily felt once more that gentle movement in her womb, as if the baby wanted to participate in the moment. Without thinking, she brought Richard's hand to the spot. "Can you feel it?" she whispered. His eyes widened as he felt the subtle movement beneath his palm. For a moment, all the chaos of the outside world seemed to disappear, leaving only that precious connection between them. "I won't let you go," he declared, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I won't lose this. I won't lose you too." Before Emily could respond, Mrs. Martha burst into the room, her face pale with concern. "Mr. Montgomery, Miss Emily, there's something you need to see. It's about Miss Bethany. She's giving a live interview on television." Bethany Monroe's face dominated the television screen in the living room, her carefully rehearsed tears glistening under the studio lights. Dressed in an elegant light blue ensemble that made her appear even more fragile, she played the role of victim with calculated precision. "It was a terrible shock to discover," she delicately sobbed into her silk handkerchief. "Richard and I were planning to resume our relationship. We had even scheduled a dinner to discuss our future when I discovered he was having an affair with the maid." The presenter, famous for her merciless interviews, leaned forward with predatory interest. "And the pregnancy? What do you have to say about that?" Emily felt her knees weaken. How did Bethany know they had been so careful to keep it a secret? Richard supported her, guiding her to the sofa while his eyes remained fixed on the screen. "Ah, yes," Bethany sniffled dramatically. "The pregnancy. You know, I really didn't want to talk about this, but the public deserves to know the truth. This isn't the first time she's tried this scheme." "What do you mean?" The presenter was practically jumping in her chair. "I discovered that she attempted something similar in her previous employment, a traditional family as well. It's a pattern, you understand, seducing rich and vulnerable men." Richard turned off the television with such force that the remote control cracked in his hand. "This is absurd. Complete lies." But Emily barely heard him. Her world was spinning, not from dizziness this time, but from pure disbelief. How dare Bethany invent such a story? Her previous job had been in a small clothing store before securing the position at the Montgomery mansion. "We need to do something," Mrs. Martha declared, her voice trembling with indignation. "We can't let her destroy the girl's reputation like this." Richard was already on the phone again, his voice cutting like steel. "Dr. Mendez, yes, I saw it. I want you to file all possible actions. Defamation, slander, moral damages, I don't care about the cost." It was then that Emily felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. It was Dorothy, her mother, whom Mrs. Martha had called without her knowing. "My daughter," the lady said softly, her eyes laden with maternal concern. "You need to come with me, at least for a few days, until this storm passes." "No," Richard interrupted, hanging up the phone. "Emily isn't going anywhere. I won't let Bethany separate us." "With all due respect, Mr. Montgomery," Dorothy faced his gaze with the dignity that only a mother possesses. "My daughter needs peace now. This environment, all this pressure, isn't good for her or for the baby." Emily observed the exchange between the two, feeling torn. Part of her wanted to stay, to face the storm alongside Richard. But another part, the part that now carried a life inside her, longed for the simple comfort of her mother's house, away from the spotlights and intrigues of high society. "Richard," she finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "My mother is right. I need some time to breathe." He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "What if I go with you?" The suggestion caught everyone by surprise. Richard Montgomery, the relentless businessman, the man who practically lived for his business, offering to leave everything behind? "Don't be silly," Emily smiled sadly. "You have a company to run. a reputation to defend. A family to protect, he completed, his voice laden with an emotion that made her heart race. It was at that moment that his cell phone rang. The name flashing on the screen made Richard turn pale. It was his main investor. The crisis was already affecting business. "Answer it," Emily whispered, gently squeezing his hand. "I'll be fine. I promise to stay in touch, but I need this time." As Richard reluctantly took the call, Dorothy was already organizing her daughter's departure. Mrs. Martha, with tears in her eyes, helped collect the most necessary belongings. What none of them knew was that, at that exact moment, Bethany Monroe was leaving the television studio with a satisfied smile on her lips and a mysterious envelope in her purse, an envelope that contained information that could change everything again. Dorothy's house was a small two-story home in the suburbs, as different from the Montgomery mansion as possible. But for Emily, at that moment, it was exactly the refuge she needed. The familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee and homemade bread filled the environment, bringing a sense of comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. "Here, daughter." Dorothy offered a cup of chamomile tea sitting beside her on the worn but cozy sofa. "Now tell me properly about this story. I want to know everything that Viper has been saying." "About you." Emily sighed, running her hand over her belly that, now entering the 4th month, was beginning to become more visible. "Mom, she's invented horrible things. She said I've tried to pull scams before, that I seduced Richard." "And him? How is he handling all this?" "He—" Emily hesitated, a small smile appearing on her lips. "He's been surprising me. He's different from the cold man I met at the beginning. He even wanted to come here with me." Dorothy studied her daughter with experienced eyes. "And do you love him?" The question caught Emily by surprise. Amid all the chaos of the past few months, she had barely had time to examine her own feelings. I think so, Mom. But sometimes I'm afraid that it's just gratitude, or..." The sound of the doorbell interrupted her confession. Dorothy went to answer, returning moments later with a concerned expression and a manila envelope in her hands. "It came for you. A messenger delivered it." Emily took the envelope with trembling hands. There was no sender, just her name written in an elegant handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside, she found a series of documents and a handwritten note. "Not everything is as it seems. If you want to protect yourself and your child, read these papers carefully. Some truths need to come to light." The documents were old, dated more than a decade ago. As Emily read, her face lost its color. They were medical records, old reports, and a birth certificate. "Mom," her voice failed. "Richard's ex-wife, Lauren. She had a child." "What do you mean?" Dorothy approached, concerned about her daughter's pallor. "It says here that she gave birth to a boy, but..." Emily continued reading, her hands trembling more and more. "The child was born with severe health problems. Richard never mentioned this. He told me that Lauren abandoned him, but according to these documents..." Emily's cell phone vibrated, interrupting her discovery. It was a message from Richard. "We need to talk, it's urgent. I discovered something about Bethany that changes everything." Before she could respond, another message arrived, this time from Mrs. Martha. "Miss Emily, Miss Bethany appeared at the mansion. She's different. She's crying for real this time. Something happened." Emily felt the baby move in her womb as if sensing her agitation. The pieces of a puzzle she didn't even know existed were beginning to fit together, forming an image she feared to contemplate. "Daughter," Dorothy called, concerned about her sudden silence. "Mom," Emily raised her eyes from the documents, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I've discovered why Bethany is doing all this. It's not for money, nor for status." She picked up one of the last sheets from the envelope, where an old photograph showed a younger Bethany smiling next to Lauren, Richard's ex-wife. On the back, a single handwritten sentence, "My two favorite sisters." "It's for revenge," Emily concluded, feeling the weight of the revelation. "Bethany is Lauren's sister, and there's much more to this story than Richard told me." The sound of a car abruptly parking in front of the house made the two women start. Through the window, Emily saw Richard hurriedly getting out of the vehicle, his face bearing an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of urgency, fear, and guilt. Dorothy's small garden, with its well-tended rose bushes and a wooden bench worn by time, became the unlikely setting for one of the most difficult conversations Emily had ever had in her life. Richard sat beside her, the documents spread between them like pieces of a painful puzzle. "Why did you never tell me about your son?" Emily asked softly, noticing how his hands trembled as he touched the old reports. Richard closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. "Because that's the hardest part of my story, the part I've been trying to forget for 10 years. Gabriel, my son, was born with a severe heart condition." He paused, his voice choked with contained emotion. "Lauren and we were so young, so unprepared. The doctor said he would need constant care, that his life would be a daily battle, and I got lost." "What do you mean?" "I buried myself in work, in financial concerns, in practical preparations. It was easier to deal with numbers and procedures than with the emotional reality of the situation. Lauren needed support, companionship, but I only knew how to be practical." Emily felt her heart tighten as she saw the pain in his eyes. "And Bethany, how does she fit into all this?" Bethany was more than Lauren's sister-in-law. She was her best friend, her confidant. She was there when I wasn't, giving the emotional support I should have given. Richard ran his hands over his face, seeming to age years in seconds. When he left us, at just 6 months old, something in Lauren broke. And Bethany, she never forgave me. That's why she came back now, Emily murmured, understanding. When she found out about the pregnancy, she sees history repeating itself, Richard completed. In her mind, I'll do to you what I did to Lauren, emotionally abandon you when you need me most. A heavy silence fell over them, broken only by the distant sound of children playing in the street. Emily unconsciously caressed her belly, thinking about Gabriel, the child she would never know but who was now part of her story too. "There's one more thing you need to know," a familiar voice interrupted the moment. It was Mrs. Martha, who was hurriedly arriving through the gate. In her hands, another envelope. "Martha, what are you doing here?" Richard asked, surprised. The housekeeper, who always maintained such a professional posture, seemed agitated. "Miss Bethany appeared at the mansion early this morning, distraught. She gave me this, said she couldn't carry this secret anymore." Emily opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter, Lauren's elegant handwriting filling several pages. The date showed it had been written a few days before she left. "Dear Beth," the letter began, "when you read this, I will have already gone. I can no longer continue here pretending that everything is okay. Richard is not the monster you think. He's suffering as much as I am. He just doesn't know how to show it. The problem is that I can't look at him without seeing our little angel, without remembering everything we lost." Emily continued reading aloud, her voice faltering at certain moments. The letter revealed the torment of a devastated mother, but also spoke of a love that never truly died. It was just buried beneath the pain of loss. "That's why I ask, my dear sister. Don't blame him. Don't turn your pain into vengeance. Richard deserves a second chance at love, deserves to learn to be the man I know he can be." Richard had tears in his eyes when Emily finished reading. "All these years, I thought she had abandoned me because she didn't love me anymore." "She left because she loved you too much," Emily whispered, finally understanding the complexity of that story. "And Bethany, she kept this letter all this time, carrying the guilt of not having respected her sister's last request. It was then that an abrupt movement from the baby made her gasp, stronger than any previous one." Richard immediately placed his hand on her belly, and for the first time there was no hesitation in his touch. "This child," he said with a choked voice, "will not grow up with an emotionally absent father. I promise." The moment these words were spoken, another figure appeared in the garden. Bethany Monroe was standing by the gate, her face marked by real tears this time, not the ones dramatized for the cameras. Dorothy's garden, normally so peaceful, became the stage for a moment that would forever change the lives of all present. Bethany, always so elegant and composed, looked like a shadow of the woman she used to be. Her expensive dress was wrinkled, her hair disheveled, and her makeup smudged by tears revealed a vulnerability she had always fought to hide. I read the letter thousands of times, she began, her voice hoarse. Every word, every comma. But I couldn't accept it. It was easier to hate you, Richard, than to face my own guilt. Emily watched the scene with a heavy heart. The woman before her was no longer the venomous viper who had tried to destroy her. Life, she was just a sister devastated by loss, trapped in a cycle of pain that had lasted a decade. What guilt, Bethany? Richard asked softly, taking a step in her direction. She sobbed, taking another paper from her purse. I knew Lauren was planning to leave. She told me, asked for my help. If I had told you, if I had insisted that you two talk. It wasn't your fault, Richard interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. Nor mine nor Lauren's. Sometimes pain is too great to be shared. Dorothy, who was watching everything from the porch, discreetly went inside the house and returned with a tray of tea. The simple gesture, so characteristic of her nurturing nature, broke some of the tension in the air. Come, my child, she called to Bethany, surprising everyone with the affectionate treatment. Have some tea. It's good for the soul. Bethany hesitated for a moment before accepting the invitation. She sat on the porch like a lost child, accepting the cup with trembling hands. You have her eyes, she said softly to Emily. Not the physical eyes, but that look. That way of seeing through people. Lauren had that too. Emily sat beside her, ignoring all the months of resentment and manipulation. Tell me about her, about Lauren, about Gabriel. And there, on that simple porch with the afternoon sun painting elongated shadows in the garden, Bethany began to speak. She spoke about the sister who was more than a sister, about the nephew who filled with love the short time he spent on earth, about the dreams and fears shared in sleepless dawns. Richard listened to every word with silent tears running down his face, finally allowing himself to feel all the pain he had kept inside for so long. Mrs. Martha, discreet, as always, wiped her own eyes with the corner of her apron. And now? Bethany finally asked, looking at her empty cup. How do I fix all the harm I've caused? By starting over, Emily replied simply, one day at a time. It was at that moment that the baby moved again, as if wanting to join the conversation. Emily, in an impulse that surprised even herself, took Bethany's hand and placed it on her belly. Feel that? It's your family too, if you want. Bethany's eyes widened as she felt the movement. I don't deserve... Everyone deserves a second chance, Dorothy intervened, her simple wisdom cutting through the complexities of the situation. Even us, with our gravest mistakes. Richard approached, kneeling before Bethany. She's right. Lauren knew that. That's why she wrote that letter. We can't change the past, but we can choose how to move forward. Mrs. Martha, who had remained silent observing everything, finally spoke. Perhaps it's time to transform the pain into something positive. What do you mean? Bethany asked, wiping away her tears. The medical center being built at the company, the housekeeper continued, looking at Richard. Why not give it Gabriel's name? A place to help other children, other families. A trembling smile appeared on Bethany's lips, the first genuine smile any of them had seen on her face. Lauren would have liked that. The weeks that followed brought changes that no one could have predicted. The Montgomery mansion, once a place of heavy silences and formalities, began to gain a new life. Emily had returned, but not as an employee. She now occupied her legitimate place beside Richard, who made a point of making her position clear to everyone. Bethany, in a gesture of true repentance, called a press conference. This time there were no fake tears or sensationalist accusations. With dignity and honesty, she publicly retracted, taking responsibility for her actions and apologizing not only to Emily and Richard, but to everyone she had involved in her misdirected revenge. I spent 10 years cultivating bitterness, she declared before the cameras, when I should have honored my sister's memory with love and understanding. Today I am here to correct that mistake. News of the retraction spread faster than the previous gossip. Soon, the sensationalist headlines were replaced by stories of redemption and new beginnings. But the real transformation was happening, away from the spotlight, in the small moments of everyday life. On a particularly significant afternoon, Emily found Richard in his office, but he wasn't alone. Bethany was with him, and on the desk were blueprints and documents spread out. "Emily, good that you're here," Richard smiled, extending his hand to her. "We were discussing the plans for the Gabriel Medical Center." The project, which had begun as a suggestion from Mrs. Martha, had transformed into a mission for all of them. It would be a specialized treatment center for pediatric heart conditions, offering not only cutting-edge medical care, but also emotional support for families. "I thought of using the winter garden to create a common area," Bethany explained, her eyes shining with genuine enthusiasm. "A place where families can meet, share experiences." "Like my mother's garden," Emily commented softly, remembering the healing power of that simple space. "Exactly," Bethany smiled, and for the first time, there was no trace of her former arrogance. "By the way, do you think Dorothy would agree to help us with the landscaping? No one understands how to make a welcoming environment like she does." Emily felt the baby move, as always happened in moments of emotion. In the latest exams, they had discovered it was a girl. Richard insisted on calling her Little Warrior, but Emily held a special name in her heart. She was just waiting for the right moment to share it. "We have another surprise," Richard announced, pulling Emily closer. "We've decided to get married. Before the baby is born. Something simple in the garden, just with the people who really matter." Bethany paused for a moment, a shadow of emotion passing over her face. Lauren would have loved that. She always said that the best moments in life happen in gardens. "That's why," Emily took a deep breath, gathering courage, "we want you to be the godmother, not just of the wedding, but of the baby too." The silence that followed was laden with emotion. Bethany raised her hands to her mouth, tears, this time genuine, glistening in her eyes. "Are you sure after everything I did?" "Family is about forgiveness and new beginnings," Richard replied, his voice firm. "That's what Lauren tried to teach us in her letter. It's time we honor her wish." It was at that moment that Mrs. Martha entered the office, carrying an old box that made Bethany's eyes widen in recognition. "I found this in the attic," the housekeeper explained. "I thought perhaps, well, there are some things here that should be passed on." Inside the box was a small baptismal gown, delicately hand-embroidered. A yellowed tag identified, "Gabriel Montgomery, with love, Lauren." She kept it, Bethany whispered, touching the fabric with reverence. "And now," Emily completed, placing her hand on her belly, "it will be used again, by Lauren Emily Montgomery." The name hung in the air like a blessing, a bridge between past and future, between pain and hope. Richard embraced Emily from behind, their hands joining over the place where their daughter grew, carrying in her name the legacy of love and forgiveness that had transformed all their lives. The garden of the Montgomery mansion had never been so beautiful. Dorothy, with her wisdom about flowers and the right time for each planting, had transformed the space into a true paradise. White roses and delicate orchids shared space with simpler wildflowers, creating a perfect balance between elegance and naturalness, exactly like the union that was about to be celebrated. Emily observed the final preparations from the window of the room she now shared with Richard. Her wedding dress, a simple but elegant piece, had been specially designed to accommodate her 6-month belly. Lauren Emily, as if sensing the importance of the moment, was moving more than usual. "Are you nervous?" Bethany asked, entering the room with a velvet box in her hands. The transformation in her appearance was remarkable, not just in the softer look she had adopted, but mainly in her eyes, now free from the weight of bitterness. "A little," Emily admitted, caressing her belly, "but it's a good nervousness." "I have something for you." Bethany opened the box, revealing a delicate pearl necklace. It was Lauren's. She always said it would be worn again on a special day. Emily felt tears forming in her eyes as Bethany fastened the necklace around her neck. "It's perfect." "You know," Bethany began, adjusting a strand of Emily's hair. "I spent so much time trying to keep the pain of losing Lauren alive that I almost lost the chance to truly honor her memory. She would have loved to see you make Richard smile again." A gentle knock on the door interrupted the moment. It was Mrs. Martha, carrying a bouquet of flowers from the garden. "It's time, girls. And Emily. There's someone here who wants to see you before the ceremony." To Emily's surprise, it was Richard who entered. He was elegant in his dark suit, but there was something different about his expression, a vulnerability he no longer tried to hide. "I know it's against tradition," he said, "but I needed to see you before. I need to tell you something." Bethany and Mrs. Martha discreetly left the room, leaving the couple alone. "What is it?" Emily asked, noticing how his hands trembled slightly. "I found this early this morning." He took a folded paper from his pocket. "It's a letter I wrote to Lauren years ago but never had the courage to send. I want you to read it." Emily carefully unfolded the paper, recognizing Richard's handwriting, younger and more anguished. "Lauren, you've been gone for a year, and only now have I found the courage to write these words, not to apologize. I know that words cannot undo my failure to be the husband and father you and Gabriel needed. I write to promise you that if one day fate gives me another chance to love, to be a father, I will not make the same mistakes. I will not let the fear of suffering prevent me from feeling, from showing, from being truly present." "Richard," Emily whispered, moved. "I kept this letter all these years," he continued, his voice breaking. "And today, before we get married, I want you to know you and Lauren Emily are that second chance. The chance to do things differently, to be the man I always should have been." At that moment, the baby gave a particularly strong kick, making Emily laugh through her tears. "I think she's approving." Richard knelt down, kissing Emily's belly before rising and taking her hands in his. "Shall we do this right?" Outside, the garden was filled with people who truly mattered. Dorothy, proud in her new dress, animatedly conversed with the few guests. Mrs. Martha gave the final touches to the decoration. Bethany, in her role as maid of honor, checked every detail with a serene smile on her face. And above all, a gentle wind ruffled the garden flowers, carrying with it the promise that sometimes, from the greatest pains, the most beautiful love stories can be born. Life after the wedding brought a different routine to the Montgomery mansion. Emily, now in her 7th month of pregnancy, had transformed Richard's once somber office into a more welcoming environment, with light curtains that let natural light in and photographs that told the story of their family, including a small black and white photo of Gabriel, which now occupied a place of honor on the wall. On a particularly busy morning, while Emily was organizing some documents for the medical center, which was in its final stage of construction, a sudden dizziness made her sit down abruptly. Mrs. Martha, who was passing through the hallway, immediately noticed that something was wrong. "Miss Emily!" The housekeeper ran to help her. "Are you feeling ill?" "Just a dizzy spell, Martha. It must be fatigue." But the experienced housekeeper didn't seem convinced. "Dr. Torres has already arrived for the meeting about the medical center. I'll ask him to take a look at you first." Before Emily could protest, the doctor was already being called. Dr. Torres, a gentleman with graying hair and a gentle look, was the medical director chosen to lead the Gabriel Medical Center project. His 30 years of experience treating pediatric heart conditions made him perfect for the position. "Blood pressure a bit low," he commented after a quick examination. "And these swollen ankles. How long have you been experiencing these dizzy spells?" "They started a few days ago," Emily admitted. "But I thought it was normal for pregnancy." The doctor frowned. "As a precaution, let's run some tests. This isn't to frighten you, but with your family history." "Family history?" Emily asked, confused. It was then that Bethany, who had arrived for the meeting, intervened. "Emily, there's something you need to know, something about your own family." Gently, Bethany explained that, during her investigations driven by revenge, she had discovered something about Emily's past that not even she knew. Her maternal grandmother had passed away when she was still young, a victim of a hereditary heart condition. "Why did my mother never tell me this?" Emily whispered, feeling the weight of the revelation. "Dorothy probably wanted to protect you," Bethany responded softly. "But now with the pregnancy, we need to monitor closely. Dr. Torres completed. "Both you and the baby." The news fell like a bomb on the family. Richard, upon being informed, immediately cancelled all his meetings and began working from home. Dorothy temporarily moved into the mansion, bringing with her her medicinal herbs and maternal care. "I didn't want to worry you," Dorothy explained to her daughter that night while preparing a calming tea. "Your grandmother, she was so young, so full of life, it was all so quick. But Mum, that information is important. What if Lauren Emily..." "No," Richard firmly interrupted, holding Emily's hand. "We're not going to think the worst. The Gabriel Medical Center isn't being built for nothing. We have the best specialists, the best equipment." It was at that moment that Mrs. Martha entered the room with an envelope in her hands. "Excuse me for interrupting, but this arrived for Miss Emily. It's from the laboratory." The silence was heavy as Emily opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The results of the preliminary tests were there in black and white. Dr. Torres, who had stayed to monitor the case, adjusted his glasses to read the document. "Well," he began, a small smile forming on his lips, "I have 2 pieces of news." "2?" Emily asked, her heart accelerating. "Yes, first, your cardiac indicators are all within normal range. We'll continue monitoring, of course, but there are no signs of your grandmother's condition." A collective sigh of relief filled the room, but there was something in the doctor's smile that suggested the second piece of news was even more surprising. "And the second?" Richard asked, squeezing Emily's hand. "Well," the doctor smiled more openly, "it seems Lauren Emily is going to have company. What do you think of the name Gabriel for her twin brother?" The news of the twins fell like an unexpected blessing on the family. The discovery that they would have not just Lauren Emily, but also a boy who could carry the name Gabriel, seemed a kind of gift from destiny, as if the universe itself was weaving a story of redemption and new beginnings. The baby's room, which was already being prepared, had to be completely rethought. Bethany, who had discovered a surprising talent for interior design during the medical center project, took on the task with enthusiasm. 2 cribs, but keeping everything connected, she explained, showing the design she had made, as if it were an embrace surrounding them both. Mrs. Martha, in turn, coordinated a true revolution in the house, preparing everything for the arrival of the twins. "Babies need routine," she declared with her life experience, "and with 2, we need double organization." On a particularly special afternoon, while everyone was gathered in the garden for tea, Richard surprised Emily with an unexpected gift. It was an old box, carefully restored, containing 2 small diaries. This one, he explained, showing the first, bound in blue leather, was the diary that Lauren kept during her pregnancy with Gabriel. And this one, he presented a new one, in soft green. "Tones is for you to record your own journey." Emily gently leafed through the pages of Lauren's diary, feeling a deep connection with this woman she never knew, but who was now such an important part of her story. "Are you sure you really want to use the name Gabriel?" she asked Richard softly. "Won't it be too painful?" Richard sat beside her, his hand naturally finding its way to the belly where their children were growing. "It will be a tribute, a way to keep alive not just the memory, but the hope he represented." "And this time," Bethany added, her voice laden with emotion, "he won't be alone. He'll have his sister, Lauren Emily, by his side." It was then that Dorothy, who was unusually quiet, cleared her throat to get everyone's attention. "There's one more thing you need to know." She took a yellowed envelope from her purse. "I found this among my mother's things, Emily's grandmother." The envelope contained an old photograph and a letter. In the photo, a young woman smiled, holding 2 babies in her arms. "Your grandmother was also a twin," Dorothy revealed, "and although she passed away early, her sister lived a long and healthy life. What I want to say is, genes don't always follow the same path." The revelation brought a new comfort to Emily, as if another piece of her history's puzzle was fitting into place. "Family is truly something amazing," Mrs. Martha commented, serving more tea. "Like a garden, sometimes the roots are deeper and more intertwined than we can see." The afternoon sun cast golden shadows over the garden, and a gentle breeze ruffled the flowers Dorothy had planted. Emily could feel her babies moving, as if dancing to the rhythm of that perfect afternoon. "I think they already love each other," she whispered to Richard. "I can feel as if they're always hugging." "As it should be," he replied, kissing her forehead. "And this time I'll do everything differently. I'll be present in every moment, in every laugh, in every tear." Bethany, who was helping Mrs. Martha with the cups, paused for a moment, her eyes shining with contained tears. "Lauren used to say that love is like water. It always finds a way, even through the hardest stones." And there, in that garden that had witnessed so many transformations, a new family strengthened, not just by the bonds of blood, but by the bonds of love, forgiveness, and hope they had built together. The Gabriel Medical Center was about to be inaugurated, coinciding with Emily's 8th month of pregnancy. The imposing building, with its modern and welcoming lines, was the physical materialization of the transformation that had occurred in all those lives. On a busy morning of final preparations, Emily walked through the corridors of the medical center alongside Bethany, observing the last details being implemented. The walls, painted in soft tones, were decorated with colorful murals that told stories of hope. The therapeutic garden, Dorothy's personal project, was an oasis of peace in the midst of the hospital structure. "Can you believe it?" Bethany asked, adjusting a picture on the reception wall, an enlarged photo of little Gabriel smiling during his only Christmas. From all that hatred, this was born. Emily caressed her prominent belly, feeling the twins move. Sometimes the greatest blessings are born from the greatest pains. As they walked down the main corridor, an unusual commotion caught their attention. A group of workers was running toward the therapeutic garden, and shouts of concern echoed through the space. "What's happening?" Emily asked, feeling a pang of concern. "The fountain structure," someone shouted. "It's giving way." Emily's heart raced. That fountain had been a special project of Richard's, a tribute to the water that Lauren so associated with love. Without thinking twice, she headed to the garden, closely followed by Bethany. The scene they found was chaotic. The beautiful marble fountain, the centerpiece of the therapeutic garden, had cracks in its base and water was beginning to leak in an uncontrolled manner. Richard was there, barefoot in the accumulating water, trying to coordinate the workers. "Richard!" Emily called, taking a step forward. It was then that everything happened very quickly. A loud boom echoed through the garden as part of the structure gave way. Emily, startled by the noise, took a step back, but her foot slipped on the water. That already covered the floor. Bethany reacted instantly, holding Emily before she fell. Richard ran toward her, soaked and frightened. "Are you okay?" he asked, his hands trembling as he touched her face. "I am, but—" Emily stopped, feeling a strong contraction. "Ouch." "Emily?" Bethany noticed her sister-in-law's face turning pale. "The babies," Emily whispered, holding her belly. "I think they've decided they want to participate in the inauguration." The initial panic soon gave way to coordinated action. Dr. Torres, who fortunately was already in the building for a meeting, took control of the situation. Within minutes, Emily was being accommodated in one of the newly set-up rooms of the medical center. "Well," the doctor smiled after examining her, "it seems the Gabriel Medical Center will have its first emergency even before the official inauguration." "But it's too early," Richard protested, holding Emily's hand. "There are still 4 weeks to go." "Twins tend to be hasty," Dr. Torres explained calmly. "And from what I'm seeing, these two are particularly eager to meet the world." The news spread quickly. Dorothy arrived in record time, bringing with her a bag that was already prepared for this moment. Mrs. Martha organized a veritable task force to ensure everything was perfect in the room. "It's as if they knew," Bethany commented, helping to arrange the room with fresh flowers from the garden. "As if they wanted to be born right here, in the place that represents so much for our family." Emily, between increasingly frequent contractions, managed to smile. "Lauren must be enjoying all this coincidence." Richard, who hadn't left his wife's side, kissed her sweaty forehead. "This time it will be different," he promised. "I'm here, and I won't leave your side for even a second." It was when a particularly strong contraction made Emily squeeze. Richard's hand hard. Dr. Torres, who was monitoring everything closely, signaled to his team. "It's time," he announced. "Let's meet these little warriors. I need to continue this family drama, maintaining the American character names I've established and the overall tone and structure of the original story. I should translate the next section faithfully while adapting cultural references to an American context." The hours that followed were intense, filled with Emily's strength and determination and Richard's unwavering support. The room in the Gabriel Medical Center, which still carried the smell of fresh paint and new beginnings, became the setting for one of the most important moments in that family's life. "I can see the first baby's head," Dr. Torres announced with a smile in his voice. "One more push, Emily." Richard, who firmly held his wife's hand, felt his heart beating so hard it seemed about to burst from his chest. This time he wouldn't flee to work, wouldn't hide behind numbers and reports. He was present for every breath, every contraction, every moment. "You can do it, my love," he whispered in Emily's ear. "Our little ones are almost here." With one last heroic effort, Emily brought Lauren Emily into the world, who announced her arrival with a strong, healthy cry. Minutes later, which seemed like an eternity, her brother Gabriel also arrived, slightly smaller but equally determined in his protests against the new world receiving him. "They're perfect," Dr. Torres declared after the initial examinations. "Both with good vital signs, normal heartbeats." The mention of the baby's healthy hearts didn't go unnoticed by anyone. It was as if a cycle of worries and fears was finally closing, giving way to a new beginning full of hope. When the twins were finally placed in Emily's arms, the world seemed to stop for a moment. Lauren Emily, with dark fuzz on her head, firmly held her father's finger, while her brother Gabriel, slightly smaller but equally perfect, nestled close to his mother's heart. "May I?" Bethany asked softly from the door, her eyes shining with contained tears. Emily nodded, and soon the room was full of love and family. Dorothy couldn't contain her tears seeing her grandchildren, and Mrs. Martha discreetly photographed each precious moment with her cell phone. "Lauren Emily has her father's eyes," Bethany observed, gently touching her niece's tiny hand. "But the nose is just like Aunt Lauren's. And Gabriel," Richard added, his voice breaking, "has the same dimple in his chin as his guardian angel." It was at that moment that something extraordinary happened. A ray of sunlight crossed through the window, creating a rainbow on the wall through the glass of the IV stand. The phenomenon lasted only a few seconds, but it was time enough for everyone to feel there was something magical in that moment. "It's her," Bethany whispered. "Lauren always said that when we saw a rainbow at an important moment, it would be her sending her love." Emily smiled, exhausted but happy, looking at her children. "Then she's here blessing our little ones." "And she'll always be," Richard completed, kissing the forehead of each baby. "Through the love she taught us to feel, the forgiveness she taught us to give." Dorothy, with her simple wisdom, observed, "It's no coincidence they chose to be born here at the Gabriel Medical Center. This place isn't just a hospital. It's a monument to love that overcomes pain, to life that conquers obstacles." Mrs. Martha, who had just returned from a quick check outside, brought another surprise. "You won't believe it, but the garden fountain, it stopped leaking at exactly the moment the babies were born. The workers are saying it was like magic." "It wasn't magic," Emily smiled, looking at her children. "It was love. The same love Lauren talked about, the one that always finds a way even through the hardest stones." Richard sat on the edge of the bed, carefully embracing his family. There, in that room that smelled of new beginnings, two lives were starting their journey, carrying in their names and in their hearts the legacy of love, forgiveness, and hope that had transformed so many lives. The first year in the twins, lives passed like a breath. The Gabriel Medical Center had become a symbol of hope in the city, welcoming families who, like themselves once, needed support and understanding in difficult times. The old Montgomery mansion, once so cold and formal, now overflowed with life and children's laughter. On a special Sunday afternoon, the family gathered to celebrate not only the twins' first birthday, but also the success of the medical center's first year. The garden, more flowery than ever thanks to Dorothy's constant care, was decorated with colorful balloons and ribbons dancing in the gentle breeze. Lauren Emily, with her dark curls and smile that was the spitting image of her father's, was already taking her first determined steps, always closely followed by her brother Gabriel, quieter and more observant, but equally determined in his small achievements. "Sometimes I find myself thinking," Bethany commented, helping Emily organize the dessert table, "how incredible it is how life comes full circle. Just over a year ago, I was blind with rage, trying to destroy all this." Emily smiled, taking her sister-in-law's hand, "And now you're the most doting godmother these little ones could have." On the other side of the garden, Richard played with the twins, his face illuminated by a joy that once seemed impossible. He had completely transformed as a father, present at every moment, from the middle of the night feedings to the routine checkups. Mrs. Martha, who was passing with a tray of treats, stopped to observe the scene. "You know what moves me the most? Seeing how the center has helped other families. Just yesterday, that boy from the cardiac ward finally got discharged." It was true. The Gabriel Medical Center had become more than a hospital. It was a place of transformation where families found not just medical treatment, but also emotional support and hope. The therapeutic garden, inspired by Dorothy's backyard, was a special space where parents and children could find moments of peace amid their daily battles. "Did you see the latest letter we received?" Bethany asked, taking an envelope from her purse. "It's from a mother who spent 3 months with us. She says it was in our garden that she found strength to continue fighting." Emily took the letter, recognizing in those emotionally written words the same feeling that had transformed her own life. As Lauren had said, love always found a way. It was at that moment that Richard called everyone's attention, raising a glass for a toast. "I want to thank each of you who is part of this family. A year ago, when Lauren, Emily, and Gabriel were born right here at the medical center, I thought I was living the happiest moment of my life. But each day with them, with you, Emily, and with our family, shows me that happiness can continuously grow." He paused, looking meaningfully at Emily before continuing. "And it seems our happiness is going to grow even more." Emily blushed, instinctively bringing her hand to her still flat belly. They hadn't planned to reveal the news of the new pregnancy today, but as always, Richard surprised her with his newly discovered sensitivity. "Another baby," Dorothy exclaimed, her eyes shining with emotion. "Actually," Emily smiled, exchanging a knowing look with Richard, "it's 2 again." The news was received with shouts of joy and emotional hugs. The twins, not fully understanding the reason for the commotion, clapped their hands and laughed, infected by the adults' joy. "4 babies?" Bethany laughed, wiping away a tear. "You really like doing everything in double doses." And this time, Dr. Torres, who had become a close friend of the family, commented with a smile, "We already have the perfect place to receive them." Mrs. Martha was already making plans to adapt another room in the mansion, while Dorothy mentally planned to expand her medicinal herb garden. The family was growing, and with it grew the love they had learned to express and share. 5 years had passed since that rainy night that forever changed the fate of Emily and Richard. The Montgomery mansion, now filled with children's voices and crystalline laughter, was the perfect portrait of how love can transform not just people, but also places. Lauren, Emily, and Gabriel, now 5 years old, were inseparable from their younger siblings, Lucas and Marina, who had arrived to complete the family 2 years after the birth of the first twins. The 4 children filled the house with a joy that made it seem impossible that this place had once been cold and lonely. On a special spring afternoon, the whole family gathered in the garden of the Gabriel Medical Center for an important celebration. The place, which had begun as a project of redemption, had become one of the country's leading pediatric cardiac treatment centers, helping hundreds of families find hope in difficult times. "Look at that," Bethany commented, watching the children, playing near the fountain, now a symbol of renewal. Who would have thought that the fountain that almost collapsed on the day the twins were born would become the favorite place for so many families? Emily smiled, resting her head on Richard's shoulder. It's as Lauren always said, love is like water. It always finds a way. Richard, who had become not just a present father but also a more sensitive man connected to his emotions, embraced his wife lovingly. And sometimes the path leads us exactly where we need to be, even if we don't know it at the time. Mitsu. Martha, who remained as active as ever despite the years past, approached with a surprise. A photo album she had secretly put together, documenting the journey of that family. "Look," she said, opening the album. This was from Emily's first day at the mansion. The pages told a story of transformation. There were photos of the garden wedding, of the twins' birth, of the medical center's inauguration, of Lucas and Marina's arrival. Each image was a testament to how love had conquered fear, forgiveness had overcome resentment. Dorothy, who now divided her time between caring for her grandchildren and guiding the therapeutic garden project in other hospitals, smiled with wisdom. "You know what moves me the most? Seeing how a story that began with so much pain transformed into so much blessing for so many people." It was true. The Gabriel Medical Center wasn't just a hospital. It was a place where families found hope, where children learned to fight with courage, where love daily proved its capacity to heal. "Mommy!" Lauren Emily called, running toward Emily with something in her hands. "Look what I found near the fountain." It was a small white orchid, identical to those that Lauren, Richard's first wife, had loved so much. The flower, born spontaneously among the garden stones, seemed like a sign, a silent blessing. "She's always present, isn't she?" Bethany whispered, moved. "Somehow, Lauren continues to take care of all of us." Richard took the small flower from his daughter's hands and placed it delicately in Emily's hair. "And thanks to her, I learned that love isn't a weakness. It's the greatest strength that exists." The children played, their laughter echoing through the garden like a music of hope. The afternoon sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of the flowers Dorothy had planted with such care. "You know," Emily said, looking at her gathered family, "I think I understood the true meaning of Lauren's phrase about love being like water. It's not just about finding paths. It's about nurturing, transforming, giving life. It's about making hope flourish, even in the most unlikely places." And there, in that garden that had witnessed so many transformations, the family celebrated not just their achievements, but the certainty that love, when true, has the power to rewrite stories, heal wounds, and create new beginnings. Like the small orchid that had been born among the stones, like the smiles of the children that filled that space with life, like the hearts that beat strong and healthy thanks to the medical center's care, they were living proof that, in the end, love always wins, and continues winning day after day in each small miracle, in each new dawn.